A little girl was about to step into a white van parked just outside Buckingham Palace. The royal guard on duty wasn't supposed to move, but something in her eyes, something in her walk, made him break protocol. He crossed the barrier, stopped her, then looked inside the van. What he saw made him reach for his rifle. So what exactly was inside that van? Before we reveal it, press the subscribe button and comment below where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The late morning sun filtered through London's hazy sky, casting silvery light across Buckingham Palace gates. Tourists swarmed everywhere, phones out, kids laughing and pointing, everyone trying to get that perfect shot before the changing of the guard. Children pressed against the ceremonial ropes, mesmerized by the towering soldiers in red coats and bearskin hats. Staff Sergeant Declan Rowe stood among them. 42 years old, Coldstream Guards. His face was stone, but his eyes were a hawk's. 18 years of service, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and a Queen's Gallantry Medal had drilled one lesson into his bones. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Today that whisper came from a white panel van parked across the street. It hadn't moved in 30 minutes. A middle-aged man sat behind the wheel, unshaven, engine idling. Rowe noted the faded delivery sticker that didn't match the usual courier companies in this area. From his southeast gate position, Rowe had perfect view of the forecourt. His ceremonial stance looked rigid, but his attention constantly swept the area. Battle-tested instincts never switch off. During one of those sweeps, she caught his eye. This little girl, 7, maybe 8 years old, hung back at the crowd's edge, wearing a navy hoodie and leggings despite the warm day, arms crossed tight over her chest, not bratty, but protective. Her ponytail was lopsided, done in a rush. But what bothered Rowe was what she wasn't doing. She wasn't taking pictures, wasn't laughing or pointing at the guards. Instead, she walked the same path around the crowd's edge, scanning faces, checking over her shoulder. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the street, toward that van. She did this 3 times. This wasn't wandering. This was anxious, methodical pacing. Rowe shifted his weight, watching as she glanced toward the van once more. Then it happened. A single honk. Brief, soft, deliberate. She stopped dead. Her posture changed instantly, no longer hesitant, now resigned. Like she'd received orders she didn't want to follow. She started walking toward the road, not running, just moving with robotic determination. Rowe's heart hammered. That steady thrum soldiers recognize as preparation for action. He replayed it. The van sitting there 30 minutes, that deliberate honk, no adult supervision, her robotic movement. She was heading for the side gate, straight toward that van. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong, just a girl meeting family. But Rowe had learned to spot the difference between normal and wrong. He could see it now. Arms rigid, eyes down, that stiff walk like a recruit on first parade. She was 10 feet from the street when Staff Sergeant Declan Rowe broke formation. The crowd gasped. Guards don't move. People reached for phones, thinking it was part of the show. But Rowe ignored them, walking toward the girl with military urgency. She didn't notice him at first. The van door clicked open. "Miss, step away from the road, please, Guy." She froze. From the van, "It's okay, love. Come on." The girl took one step forward, then looked back. Her lips barely moved. "Help me." Rowe moved faster, crossing to the barrier. The girl hadn't moved since mouthing those words, body angled toward the van, but feet uncertain. Tourists buzzed with confusion. The van's engine purred as the driver leaned toward his window, tapping the wheel. "It's okay, love," the man called softly. "Come on now, don't be shy." The girl stepped forward. "Miss," Rowe projected calm authority through the noise, "step away from the road, please." She turned slightly. enough for Ro to see her eyes. Not confused like a lost child's, but full of trained fear. The van door opened wider. "Anya," the man said, firmer now, "let's not make this difficult. Come here." Ro's hand drifted toward his radio. No code words, no military jargon. He pressed the button and kept his voice steady as granite. "Control, this is Sentinel-2 at East Gate. Approaching potential child safety concern. White panel van parked adjacent Victoria Lane. One minor female possibly involved. Alert Palace security." "Copy that, Sentinel-2. Dispatching assistance. Proceed with caution." The girl had completely stopped moving now. Her chin was quivering, hands clasped so tight at her front that her knuckles had gone pale. But she wasn't crying. That's what got to Ro the most. A scared kid should be crying. He took a few more steps and knelt down slightly to get on her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked, gentle as he could manage. She hesitated for what felt like forever. Then, barely above a whisper, "I'm not supposed to talk." Ro's jaw tightened like a steel trap. "That man, do you know him?" She didn't answer with words, but she slowly shook her head, and that told Ro everything he needed to know. The van revved once, inching forward just a foot or two, but it was enough to make the air crackle with tension, like right before lightning strikes. "Stay behind me," Ro told the girl, rising smoothly to his full height. He stepped between her and the road, just as the van's door opened all the way. The man leaned halfway out, palms raised in this fake innocent gesture that didn't fool anyone. "She wandered off," he said quickly, words tumbling out. "She's my niece. Gets overwhelmed in big places. I've been looking for her for 20 minutes. Ro didn't respond immediately. His eyes were scanning the vehicle's interior through that open door. The passenger seat had a crushed fast food bag, some old road atlas, and just barely visible behind the seat, a strip of grey duct tape and a small coil of zip ties. Ro's fingers brushed the clasp of his rifle strap. He didn't unclip it yet, but his hand was ready. The man noticed that movement. His voice shifted gears. "Look, mate, this is just a misunderstanding. Kids panic. You know how they are." Ro said only one thing in reply. She just mouthed the words, "Help me. I suggest you put the vehicle in park. Now." The man blinked like he'd been slapped, then forced out this nervous chuckle. "This is absurd. I told you I'm her Ro cut him off clean. "Engine off, hands on the dashboard. This is your only warning." A wave of silence rippled through the crowd behind them. People were definitely filming now, but Ro couldn't care less. His eyes never left the man, and his body remained planted like bedrock between a frightened little girl and whatever nightmare she'd almost walked into. In that moment, Buckingham Palace wasn't being guarded by pageantry and tradition. It was being guarded by a father, a soldier, and a man whose 18 years of training had all led to this single moment when silence finally got broken for exactly the right reason. Ro kept his stance steady, rifle cradled loosely but ready to move in a heartbeat, as he stood between the girl and this man who was now leaning against the van door like this was just another Tuesday afternoon. The guy gave this slight smirk, trying to play it off like the whole thing was no big deal. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill here," he said. "I came to pick her up. She wandered off during our walk from the gardens. Kids do that all the time. I've been driving around in circles looking for her." Ro didn't waste breath on a response. He simply looked down at the child. The girl was clutching the hem of Ro's red ceremonial tunic, like it was a lifeline. Her knuckles had gone completely white, and her eyes were wide, full of questions she was too scared to ask out loud. "Hey, sweetheart," the man tried again, softening his voice to that fake, gentle tone. "It's me, remember? Uncle Rob, you've had your little adventure. Come on now." She didn't budge. Ro leaned slightly toward her, without breaking eye contact with the man. "You said your name isn't Sophie. What is your name?" The girl hesitated, glancing at the van, then at Roe, then back down at the pavement, finally barely audible. "Anya?" Roe's jaw flexed once. He turned his attention back to the driver. "She says her name is Anya." The driver threw his arms up in exasperation. "Kids lie all the time, especially when they've been scolded. I told you, she gets like this when she's upset. I'm just here to take her home." Roe's voice got firmer. "Then you'll be happy to wait for the authorities to confirm your story." "Are you serious?" The man's tone sharpened like a blade. "This is a bloody circus. I don't need to be interrogated by some mannequin with a gun. She's scared of you, not me." Roe didn't even blink. "You're parked in a restricted area, with no identification visible. You've offered no documentation proving guardianship. You claim she's your niece. She says she doesn't know you. That's more than enough for me." The man let out this bitter chuckle, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You think you've got me figured out, huh? Palace guard with a rifle and a chip on his shoulder, trying to play hero?" Roe stepped slightly closer, his shadow now blocking most of the girl from the man's view. "Keep your hands on the dashboard." The man's eyes narrowed to slits. "You've got no authority to hold me here. What are you even planning to do? Stand in front of my van until the police arrive?" Roe didn't answer, didn't need to. He simply took one measured step closer to that open driver's door, and that's when he saw it. Down on the passenger floorboard, a worn teddy bear that had seen better days, a juice box with a straw still in it, and a second backpack, purple, covered in faded name tags and glitter stickers. Roe leaned just enough to get a glimpse into the rear of the van. His stomach dropped into his boots. There was a folded blanket, a roll of plastic sheeting, and a bottle of children's shampoo, half empty, sitting right next to what looked like a first aid kit. The man followed his gaze and saw what Roe was looking at. His posture changed completely. Not defensive anymore, but calculating. Cold. He started closing the van door slowly, inch by inch. Roe's voice dropped to that dangerous, quiet tone. "Turn the engine off. Hands where I can see them." "I told you," the man growled. "She's my family." Roe unslung his rifle from his chest, still not aimed anywhere, but held in ready position. His voice was firm now, loud enough to carry, "Final warning! Shut off the engine!" Behind him, the girl let out a small whimper. A faint tremor ran down Roe's forearms, not from fear, from the effort of controlling himself, containing that urge to act until the moment was exactly right. He pressed his radio again. "Post 5 to control. Driver is resisting cooperation. Visible signs of child restraint materials in vehicle. Stand by for possible escalation." The crowd behind the rope barriers was fully alert now. Cameras were up everywhere. People had stopped moving around, creating this sea of still faces, all watching the red-coated guard who had shattered every expectation of ceremonial silence and stepped into something deadly serious. For Declan Roe, this had moved far past ceremony and protocol. Now it was about keeping a little girl alive. Roe could feel that familiar tension coiling in his stomach, the kind that builds up just before everything explodes. He'd known it in Helmand Province, waiting in silence for the enemy to reveal their hand. Only this time, the battlefield was a busy London street, and the threat was wrapped up in everyday normalcy that made it twice as dangerous. The man in the van narrowed his eyes, still keeping one hand casually draped over the steering wheel. "She's mine," he said again, slower this time, like he was talking to someone particularly stupid. "You've got no right to interfere." "You've got no proof of that claim," Roe replied evenly, "and until the police arrive to sort this out, you're not going anywhere." The man's smile was tight and bitter as old coffee. "You really think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" Roe didn't take the bait. Instead, he turned slightly and knelt down to the girl's level again. "Anya," he said gently, "do you know this man?" The girl hesitated, her eyes darting between the van, Roe, and the crowd of strangers gathered behind the ceremonial barriers. For what felt like the longest second in history, she said nothing. Then, in a whisper so quiet he almost missed it, "No." Roe stood up, rifle firm in his grip, but still not raised. "Then you stay right here behind me." The van's engine revved once, just a light tap of the accelerator, but the message was crystal clear. The driver's expression had shifted again, less fake charm now, more cold calculation. "She's scared of that rifle you're carrying," he said, voice hardening. "That's why she's lying to you." "She was scared long before I ever moved from my post," Rose said coldly. "I watched her hesitate. I saw her freeze when you called out to her, and I saw her mouth the word help clear as day. You want to keep playing games? Don't do it here." The crowd behind the barriers was getting thicker by the minute. Some were still recording everything, others whispering to each other, trying to figure out what was happening. Most had no clue what they were witnessing, but they could sense this wasn't just some ceremonial display anymore. A palace security officer came jogging down the path toward Roe's position, stopping just long enough to take in the whole scene with professional eyes. "Guard 5, what's your report?" Roe kept his gaze locked on the van. "Possible attempted child abduction. White panel van. Driver claims family relationship. Child victim confirms non-recognition of subject. No identification documents presented. Suspicious restraint materials visible in plain sight." The security officer's eyes went wide, but he didn't waste time asking questions. He got on his radio immediately. "Control, escalate response protocol. We need immediate backup." The man in the van decided to turn up the volume, shouting loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear every word. "This is complete harassment. This is madness. I came to pick up my niece, and this lunatic thinks I'm some kind of kidnapper." The crowd started murmuring again, confused. Some looked at the little girl. Others stared at Roe's defensive stance, trying to piece together what was really happening. Anya flinched hard at the man's shouting and pressed herself against the back of Roe's legs. She didn't cry out for her parents, didn't call for anyone, just hid behind him, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Roe lowered his stance slightly, not preparing to fire, not trying to intimidate, but becoming a solid wall between the girl and whatever threat that van represented. "You're the one scaring her," the man said, dropping his voice back to that fake, concerned tone. "Just let her go. She doesn't need all this drama." Roe didn't respond with words, but he took one deliberate step closer to the van, boots hitting pavement with purpose. "Stay in your vehicle, engine off, hands on the dashboard." The man's hand hovered near the gear shift, like he was considering his options. "I'm warning you," he said. "Back off!" Roe brought his rifle to full ready position, not pointed at anything, not raised to fire, but braced and ready. He didn't break eye contact for even a second. "You move that gear shift again, and I will escalate to active engagement stance. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The driver's jaw clenched tight. For a split second, he looked like he might actually try it. Like something darker, something buried beneath all that fake charm and smooth talking was about to surface and show its true face. Then came the sound of sirens in the distance. Not close yet, but getting closer, real and undeniable. The man's shoulders dropped, but not in surrender. This was the posture of someone getting ready for whatever came next. Behind Roe, Anya whispered so quietly he almost missed it. "Please, don't let him take me." Roe didn't turn around. He adjusted his grip on the rifle and kept his voice calm and steady. "He's not taking anyone anywhere." The sirens were getting louder now, and the man in the van knew his window of opportunity was slamming shut. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles going pale, eyes flicking between Roe, the growing crowd, and that approaching sound of backup arriving. Staff Sergeant Declan Roe didn't move an inch. His boots were planted like tree roots, rifle ready but controlled. Between him and the van, the little girl stayed pressed against his back, so quiet he could feel her breathing against the back of his knee rather than hear it. 2 marked police vehicles came screaming around the corner and screeched to a halt just beyond the side gate. Uniformed officers poured out, 1 from the front, 2 more from the rear car. Palace security pointed them toward the van. "There," one called out. "Suspected child abduction attempt. Guard initiated the stop." The lead officer approached with his hand resting on his sidearm. "Sir in the van, switch off the engine and place both hands where we can see them." The man didn't comply. He just stared straight ahead through the windshield. "This is all a misunderstanding," he muttered. "You're about to ruin a good man's life over absolutely nothing." Rose spoke without turning away from the van. Subject refused to provide identification. Child confirmed she doesn't know him. There are zip ties and duct tape visible on the passenger seat. The girl behind him let out a soft gasp when she heard about the restraints. The lead officer's expression went grim. "Right then. Sir, I won't ask you again. Turn off that engine. Put your hands up where I can see them. Now." That's when the van's engine roared to life. The tyres squealed against the tarmac as the vehicle lurched forward a few feet, toward the curb, toward the open road, toward escape. "Move back!" someone shouted from the crowd, but Rowe didn't move back. He stepped forward instead, rifle braced across his chest, and shouted with the kind of drill field authority that could stop a charging bull, "Stop the vehicle, now!" The van didn't stop. Rowe raised his weapon, not to fire, but as one final unmistakable warning, and planted himself dead center between the van and the crowd. The girl shrieked and ducked behind him, hands over her ears. Police officers surged forward. One smashed the driver's window with his baton, glass exploding. Another yanked the door open, fighting to drag the man out. The driver wasn't going quietly, swinging elbows, screaming, trying to jam the van into gear while officers wrestled for control. Then came the second shock nobody saw coming. From the van's rear doors, a second man jumped out. Younger, hooded, he hit the pavement and bolted. But a plainclothes detective tackled him within seconds. As they wrestled, a child's backpack fell from his jacket. Rope spilled from his pockets. Gasps erupted from the crowd like steam from a kettle. Phones were going up everywhere now. Someone in the back shouted, "There was another one! He had rope!" Police dragged the first man completely out of the van, pinning him face first against the hood. Blood was running down his cheek where the broken glass had caught him, but he kept screaming like a madman. "You don't understand what you're doing. This is all wrong. This is all a terrible mistake." Behind Rowe, the girl collapsed to her knees and started crying. Not the dramatic wailing you'd expect, but these small, broken sobs, like something inside her, was slowly leaking out in pieces. Rowe crouched down on one knee, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder while keeping his eyes on the scene unfolding in front of them. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you." Police officers were swarming the van now, securing it as a crime scene. One of them opened the side cargo door and immediately started photographing what was inside. From where he knelt, Rowe could see it all. A second backpack, child-sized, with a name tag reading Emilia D. A juice carton, half empty and warm, more duct tape, more rope than any legitimate purpose would require. A blanket that looked like it had been used before. Latex gloves, plastic zip ties in 3 different sizes. No car seats, no family pictures, no toys or games you'd expect to see if this was really about picking up a relative. Just equipment, tools for making people disappear. The lead officer walked over to Rowe, his face pale as paper. "Staff Sergeant, you just prevented something very, very bad from happening." Rowe didn't nod or acknowledge the praise. He was still focused on the little girl, who had curled up into herself like she was trying to become invisible. "What's your full name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She sniffled and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Anya." "Anya what?" "Anya Fletcher." "Anya Fletcher," Roe repeated. "You're safe now. No one's going to take you anywhere." They moved Anya to the palace gatehouse shade, wrapping her in a police blanket despite the warm air. A female officer crouched beside her, asking gentle questions. Anya didn't say much initially, but the story emerged piece by piece. Anya Rose Fletcher, 7 years old, from Kent, missing for 2 days. Her mother had reported her missing from Canterbury's Dane John Gardens after briefly answering her phone. When she looked back, Anya had vanished. Local officers assumed she'd wandered off, until now. The older man told her he was a friend of her mother's, the officer explained quietly to Roe. Said Anya had done something bad and needed to come with him to keep her family safe. Roe's jaw worked. The second man? Unknown, no ID, but 2 backpacks in the van. They were planning another grab today. The driver was Glenn Taylor, 47, on conditional parole for online solicitation of minors. He was prohibited from being near schools or playgrounds. They suspected he was connected to a larger trafficking network. Later that afternoon, after giving his detailed statement to 2 different detectives and spending an hour with plainclothes investigators, Roe finally returned to his ceremonial post. He stood in exactly the same spot, by the same boundary marker near the palace gates, rifle at rest, shoulders squared, face expressionless. Tourists had resumed their normal flow, though many kept glancing nervously toward the spot where the van had been towed away. Some whispered to each other, others kept recording with their phones. A few had witnessed enough to understand that something serious had happened, but most just saw the aftermath. The change in Roe wasn't visible to casual observers. He stood exactly as he always did, motionless, alert, professional. His uniform was still perfectly pressed, despite everything that had happened. The adrenaline was still there, running through his veins like electricity, but it didn't show. To the tourists walking past, he was just another ceremonial guard, doing his duty. But around mid-afternoon, something happened that made all the difference. A woman arrived at the palace gates, with a child clinging tightly to her coat. She looked uncertain at first, hesitant, stepping past the barriers with the help of a palace officer who had clearly been expecting them both. It was Anya. She didn't run toward Roe, didn't wave or call out to him. She just stood there beside her mother, looking up at the guard who had seen what everyone else had missed. Roe couldn't move from his post, couldn't speak while on ceremonial duty, couldn't even acknowledge her presence. But he tilted his head just slightly. Just enough. Anya's small hand reached out and gently tugged her mother's sleeve. "That's him, Mum," she whispered, voice barely carrying on the afternoon breeze. "That's the one who saw me." Her mother's face completely crumpled with emotion. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed, and whispered a thank you toward Roe. Her lips formed the words, but her voice caught in her throat and nothing came out. Anya looked up at him once more, then leaned into her mother's side. They stayed for maybe a minute, just long enough for what needed to be said without words. Finally, they turned to walk away, escorted gently back toward the waiting police car that would take them home to Kent. But just before she climbed into the back seat, Anya looked back one more time. She didn't smile. The kid had been through too much trauma for that. But she nodded, a small, certain, deliberate nod, as if to say, "I remember what you did. I'll always remember." Later that evening, after the palace gates had closed to tourists and the ceremonial changing of the guard was complete for the day, Roe finally removed his bearskin hat and stepped off the forecourt for the last time that shift. A junior guard caught up with him near the locker rooms, clearly bursting with questions. "Sir, was that really her? The kid from earlier, the one who came back with her mum?" Roe nodded once. "What did she say to you?" Roe paused at his locker, considering the question. She didn't need to say anything. "But sir, that was incredible what you did. You probably saved her life." Roe hung up his ceremonial tunic with the same care he'd shown every day for 18 years. "I did my job." "But you broke protocol. You could have gotten in trouble." Roe turned to face the younger soldier. "Some things are more important than protocol." And with that, Staff Sergeant Declan Roe walked down the corridor toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He wasn't given a medal for what happened that day. His name didn't appear on the evening news. No newspaper ran his photograph or called him a hero. But a 7-year-old girl named Anya Fletcher went home to her family instead of disappearing forever into something too horrible to imagine. And for a man like Declan Roe, that was worth more than all the recognition in the world. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on distant battlefields. Sometimes they happen on a busy London street, in broad daylight, when one person chooses to act while everyone else just watches. Sometimes saving a life is as simple as trusting your instincts and refusing to stay silent when every fibre of your being is screaming that something is wrong. And sometimes the difference between a child going home safely and vanishing forever comes down to one soldier who remembered that protecting people is always more important than following rules. Would you have noticed the girl walking alone in that crowd? Should royal guards be trained to break protocol in emergencies like this? Have you ever seen something suspicious in public and done nothing? If this story opened your eyes to what royal guards really do beyond the ceremony, tap that like button and show your respect for these dedicated soldiers. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next Royal Guard story. We upload new ones every single day. And if someone you know still thinks these guards are just for show, send them this video. They might never look at a ceremonial soldier the same way again. Check out our other Royal Guard stories appearing on your screen right now. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.